welcome everyone. We might begin, and this is our first session of our Discovering Buddhism unit, transforming the mind, basically, or thought transformation. So it's a very exciting and a very moving topic, because it really asks us to investigate the way we feel and think about each and every situation as we arrive upon them, and work out creative ways of turning them into the most wonderful outcomes. And so it really is going to embrace every aspect of our life. So as it's Discovering Buddhism unit, we're really not presuming a background in Dharma studies. There'll be some students here who will have done other Discovering Buddhism units and maybe have had other contact. But my purpose really, as the convener of this group, is to encourage us personally to open out, to discuss the impact of some of the core ideas involved in the practices surrounding this topic. So we're going to be calling upon our experience and sharing our experience. So I'm asking everyone firstly to feel very comfortable about that. We're in a sort of a safe environment, and we have to be conscious that this video will be posted online. So that's the only sort of caveat, I suppose, when you share a story. If it's one about your terrible thing your sister or brother did to you last week and you don't want them watching the video on Tuesday, then you have to be a little bit cautious. So you just say a very close relative of mine, and just keep that in mind so you don't embarrass yourself further down the track. So as usual with our sessions, we'll begin with just a few prayers to soften our mind and prepare us for the session ahead. So I'm going to hand over to Michael. Thank you.
Computer will cooperate. And so let's begin by putting ourselves and taking a few deep breaths, just to bring ourselves present so we can put our minds in the same place that our bodies are. And let's begin by taking refuge. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon, I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this place.
Idam Guru Ratnamandalakam Niryatayami. So thank you. And thank you everyone for attending. We're going to be building on the subject matter over the course of the 6 weeks, and they're going to go incredibly swiftly, I can guarantee that. And so I'm going to be inviting us to spend the time between sessions reflecting on some of the key points that were raised. And at the end of this session, I'll send out a few questions, if you like, inquiries that we can focus upon in order to be able to discuss a little bit in the next session. And so responding to this format invites you to not just switch on and off when you're watching the screen, but to really begin to observe your behavior as you go about engaging in our daily affairs. So discovering Buddhism, as we know, is made up of 14 modules. I'll just quickly touch on the business end of things. The first module is mind and its potential. The second, how to meditate. The third, presenting the path. The fourth, the spiritual teacher. The fifth, death and rebirth. The sixth, all about karma. The seventh, refuge in the three jewels. And the eighth, establishing a daily practice. Ninth, samsara and nirvana. 10th, how to develop bodhichitta. 11, and that's our topic, transforming problems. 12th, wisdom of emptiness. And 13, introduction to Tantra. So normally, ideally, we would proceed through these discovering Buddhism topics in sequential order. However, it's recognized that for a lot of us, that's not really going to be possible. And we're therefore invited to jump in at whatever topic we have presented to us and then fledge out the others over time in order to acquit, if we wish, the full syllabus of discovering Buddhism, at which point we can receive accreditation for having completed the entire course. And so this means that we're going to have a sort of micro assessment involved at the end of this course. And that's going to be in the form of a presentation of each of the students for about 10 minutes or so on their chosen topic. And then there'll be a sort of very gentle question and answer. So I think we know this is a sort of oral examination from our university days if we went to uni. But it's also possible for those who mightn't feel comfortable with that format to submit in writing directly to me, because I realize that people are coming from different sort of backgrounds. And so this can become clearer as we proceed. But the point I'm making is it's not just a matter of attending. We also have to indicate that we're contributing to the participation of the course in a kind of dynamic way. And so that's the reason for the assessment. So the module we're discussing, which is transforming problems, is described as learning the disadvantages of selfishness and the advantages of cherishing others. Learn to employ the special techniques of mind training, which is called lojong in Tibetan, to transform problems into happiness. So this is absolutely the topic in a nutshell. And you can see here from the very beginning how extraordinarily apt it is as a topic to investigate. So I'm not actually asking us to identify as Buddhist or non-Buddhist or whatever. I'm going to be asking us how best can we transform difficult situations into their opposite. This is a radical, radical proposition. And Buddhism is going to present a whole mass of highly integrated and profoundly grounded methods for doing this. And so it's this method, this profound method of thought transformation that is like a magical key that we can sort of turn, and everything in our life can begin to be seen in a new and exciting way. And so it's really, if you like, a most incredible therapy system, but its scale extends beyond the usual boundaries of conventional secular therapy, because we can also embrace the issues of karma, rebirth, future lives, our Buddha nature, the possibility of transforming into an enlightened being ourselves on behalf of our suffering others. And so, considered from this perspective, thought transformation is also the most radical foundation for a working ethics. I'm using the word ethics here in the very best sense of the word. We talk about environmental ethics, sort of social ethics, sexual ethics, and so forth. Thought transformation is ethical at its very base, so that all of the actions that will arise out of it, because they've been so beautifully secured by the method itself, will be able to have a positive outcome, both in the short and the longer term. And so it becomes a form of reliance where we can actually relax and allow ourselves scope for change. And so the great challenge for us all, but particularly for those wishing to approach a spiritual practice, is to discover what it is that enables us to relax in this very, very deep way. So there is an advantage in breathing meditation and stilling the conceptual mind in all its crazy activity, the mad elephant mind as it's described. But we all know from our own experience that the moment we get up from our cushion, almost invariably we find ourselves snapping at a family member or getting upset because we can't find our car keys. It's almost as those most trivial things manifest as the most gargantuan problems at those very moments we're trying to pretend that we're all calm and relaxed. So this kind of relaxation we might describe as superficial. It's based on an artificial, and I'm not putting it down, it's beneficial, but an artificial suppression of the gross habitual disturbances that are running uncontrollably within our minds. So thought transformation is going to invite us in a very precise way to begin to observe these situations as they unfold and then step in and redirect them in a radical way. So I'll just give one simple little example. Instead of yelling at someone who's just abused us, maybe we've driven into their car spot, not realizing that they were waiting there and we're expecting to get it first. They jump out of their car, they come up to us and start slathering and shouting at us through the door of the car. Rather than getting angry and pent up and wishing to somehow retaliate to force them to go away, thought transformation is going to suggest the possibility of seeing this encounter, this momentary, unexpected encounter with this person we don't know, as a unique opportunity to show loving kindness. How remarkable is that? We can't find the wherewithal to do that, most of us, because we haven't trained. And so thought transformation is a system of mind training, not as some sort of doctrinaire or brainwashing technique. It's saying that we can begin to take responsibility for our own conjuring up of thoughts and begin to redirect them in skillful ways. So I'm going to quote from Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, this is one of the key sources for our course. And while I'm on this, there is a kind of a resource kit connected to the course. And if you click below the enter, you'll get access to that. But also the centre will make that available to anyone who wishes to access it. In this book, Transforming Problems into Happiness, Kabje Zopa Rinpoche is describing exactly this. He says, in order to succeed in listening to, reflecting on, and meditating on the graduated path to enlightenment for the benefit and happiness of all sentient beings, you must learn the practice of Mahayana thought transformation. And this is what this book will teach you. So by extrapolation, this is what we're inviting ourselves to begin to explore in this unit. In Mahayana thought transformation, also called mind training, you use whatever problems you experience to generate the realizations along the path to enlightenment within your mind. Instead of disturbing you, problems can actually help you develop your mind and even further your progress on the path to enlightenment. Without practicing thought transformation, you will be unable to complete your Dharma practice, your inner mental development. So Rinpoche concludes this section. He says, with regard to this particular practice of thought transformation, there are two aspects. So this is key. Two aspects. One, using suffering in the path to enlightenment. And secondly, using happiness in the path to enlightenment. Now, you might be wondering straight away, crikey, the suggestion here is that we use suffering as a spiritual path. What on earth is being discussed here? Does anyone have any idea, any sort of initial thoughts that they could share? What might it mean to say that we're going to utilize suffering on the path to enlightenment?
Ross, I think there's a number of things, actually. One would be using my own suffering. The ways, and suffering is relative, because suffering could be something as simple as I'm in a hurry and now I'm stuck at a red light.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, those trivial kinds of things. And suffering could be, I am dying from cancer, or my mother or father are dying from cancer, right? But I also think it's about being mindful of, being aware of other people's suffering as well, to open myself to that possibility that I can learn from their suffering.
We're covering a lot of ground there, actually, Michael. That's wonderful. Thank you. It does indeed have both of those aspects. It's how to transform our own experience of suffering, and that can be on a different scale. As you mentioned, it can be very trivial, or it can be enormous in the case of some major life hurdle or obstacle. But it can also concern our awareness of the suffering of others and the happiness of others. And so thought transformation is going to capture all of that in all of its complexity, because it recognizes in very, very significant ways the manner in which we're enmeshed, not just in our own situation, but in our situation with others. And so thought transformation is going to have to navigate that space that we have in relation to our view of ourselves and our view of others, and they're not unrelated. Buddhism is going to dig very deeply here and say that at the very base, each and every one of us wishes to have happiness and not to suffer, as does each and every other being. In this, we're exactly equal. And this radical equality is the foundation, actually, of our thought transformation practice. Because if, for example, I see myself as more precious, more worthy, more needy than others, I'm going to regard my environment as a place to take whatever it is that I feel I need to support this one. And so that is what Rinpoche means when he mentions the word selfish. It's a much bigger sense of selfish than we're used to. It's not just, that's my chocolate, like a kid does. My chocolate, you can't have my chocolate, you can have any other one, but not this one, it's mine. That kind of mineness is writ large in our view of reality. And so we tend to wish to consume the world to complete our selfish appetite. And so this kind of mind, says Buddhism, is a source itself of suffering. Very, very interesting to consider. So, for example, a jealous mind where we envy a neighbour's success, perhaps in their career, in their relationship, the achievements of their children, how many acres or hectares they have in their property, etc., etc. This kind of craving for what they have for ourselves isn't a source of happiness. It's actually painful in itself. And so Buddhism is going to suggest in a very provocative manner that the selfish mind, which is seeking to furnish and feed this one, even at the cost of others, is an afflicted mind. It's afflicted because it causes us unease and disturbance in very, very gross and subtle ways. So the mind that wishes to give to others, for example, Buddhism is going to say is a joyous mind because it's wishing to share resources, not harbour them for ourselves. And so we don't lose when we give. We actually gain. And so the thought transformation techniques, if we take them at the very initial moment, often appear utterly counterintuitive. You're saying do this and this will happen, but Ross, that's not what happens. I feel terrible when I do that. Buddhism is going to say, but look deeper at the benefits of transforming our attitudes at a much more sort of deeper way, in a deeper manner. So as a sort of foundation for our discussion over the 6 weeks, we're going to be focusing on a very, very famous verse poem. And it's by Langri Tangpa, and it's really the quintessence of the technique. And so I'll just read them out. These are also available in our kit. With the wish to achieve the highest aim, which surpasses even a wish-fulfilling gem, I shall train myself at all times to cherish sentient beings as supreme. Whenever I interact with others, I will view myself as inferior to all, and I will train myself to hold others superior from the depths of my heart. During all activities, I'll probe my mind, and as soon as an emotional affliction arises, since it endangers myself and others, I shall train myself to confront it directly and avert it. When I encounter beings of an unpleasant nature or character, and those oppressed by intense negative karma and suffering, as though finding a treasure of precious jewels. I will train myself to cherish them, for they are so rarely found. When others, out of jealousy, treat me wrongly with abuse and slander, I shall train myself to take the defeat upon myself and to offer the victory to others. Even if one whom I have helped or in whom I have placed great hope gravely mistreats me in hurtful ways, I shall train myself to view him as my supreme teacher. In brief, I'll train myself to offer benefit and joy to all my mothers, both directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all the hurts and pains of my mothers. By ensuring that all this remains undefiled from the stains of the 8 mundane concerns, and by understanding all things as illusion, I will train myself to be free from the bondage of clinging. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama recommends that we recite these incredible verses every day as at the core of our motivation for the day's activities. And as situations arise, we get slandered or abused, or someone whom we've helped suddenly turns on us in what appears to be a very insensitive or cruel way, we can invoke the thought transformation verses and practice accordingly. So our strategy over the course of the 6 weeks is going to be to touch upon each of these verses and kind of extrapolate out from there in terms of sharing our experience as we go. Now, in terms of the history of these teachings, they have been preserved in a very, very special way by being personally transmitted from teacher to student, from teacher to student. And so this experiential transmission is very, very precious. And so Kabje Zopa Rinpoche frequently talks about the masters of this tradition from whom we've received the teachings. And so the respect for the lineage, if you like, of the transmission comes from our understanding of the incredible benefit of the techniques themselves. And so this really leads us to a key aspect of discovering Buddhism. We're not being asked to take on anything, any idea that we don't feel comfortable with. What we're being asked to do is to pick up some aspect of the ideas that are being presented. And if a particular aspect has some pungency for us, some power to move our mind, then we take it and explore it. And so this is really an honest approach. We're not pretending anything at all. And so in the thought transformation approach, we accept that we are limited, we have foibles, we make mistakes, and so forth. But we also recognize that we have this amazing capacity for transformation. And this capacity for transformation has to be facilitated. It has to be supported. And this is where meditation also comes in. So, for example, when we become angry, we can actually withdraw from the anger scenario, the room in which we're having the fight, go to a safe place, sit down in meditation, and contemplate what has just occurred. This kind of direct application in Buddhism is referred to as analytical meditation, because we have this opportunity while sitting in meditation to unpack the situation that just occurred and maybe reorganize our response on our cushion, so that when we go back into the room, maybe the protagonist of our upset is still in that room, we are suddenly capable of approaching them in a productive and beneficial manner. We're also capable of not continuing the dreadful, compulsive attempt that we might have to somehow retaliate or win the argument, even through force. And so you can see here that these techniques dovetail perfectly with the ebb and flow of our daily experience. So whether we're having a good time, we wish to share it with a maximum number of people in the best possible way. And when we're having a difficult time, we use that according to this technique, to become more aware, as Michael's already mentioned, of the suffering of others, and take responsibility for helping them find happiness. Even if we can't do that in the immediate moment, we make a kind of commitment in our heart: I shall help you in each and every situation going forward, both in this and in all future lifetimes. And that kind of commitment, that promise, melts away the hardness of our self-cherishing mind, this sort of clinging to this one that we do with such excruciating persistence. It's exhausting. I mentioned before relaxing, the need to relax. We can't relax until we let go of the clinging so tightly, so painfully to this one, because this one in isolation doesn't exist actually in that way. Because as we know, as a parent, our happiness is entirely dependent on the care that we have for others, just as their care is a source of happiness for them as well, when they're cared for. So the great lineage holder Geshe Chekua wrote the following. He said, "My admiration for the Kadampas," these are the sort of lineage masters of this tradition, "first arose when I heard the 8 verses. Thereafter, I studied the verses and meticulously memorized the words, repeating them until I arrived at Lungsho Gegong. Yet I failed to realize their meaning. I failed to realize their meaning in my heart. For if these verses had entered my heart, things would have been quite different by then. Nevertheless, when the fear of being attacked by bandits and such appeared in my mind during the journey, I reflected upon these verses, and this helped. Also, I was often in situations where I had to seek shelter with strangers when my mind turned wild and untamed. During these times, I was confronted with seemingly unbearable situations, such as failing to secure suitable shelter, or when I became the target of others' disparagement. But in all these situations, these verses helped me." So Geshe Chekwa gives here a very personal account of the meaning. He wonders aloud, for if these verses had entered my heart, things would have been quite different by them. So this is indicating, if you like, the measure, the capacity for incredible transformation to occur if we allow these thought transformation techniques to enter our heart. Does anyone want to venture an idea of what entering the heart might mean here? What are we talking about when we say something, it's something like a verse is entering our heart?
Would it mean like opening your heart?
Yeah. And what does that mean for you? Is that Kathleen talking, or I'm not sure who's talking?
Here we go.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Opening my heart. That's a tough one.
It's meant to be an easy one.
Trusting. Yeah. Definitely trust and
that's interesting.
And love, yes.
Yeah. But trust and love for whom here?
It would have that would be me.
Yeah.
But yes.
So is that, going to end up maybe throwing questions back at you, but everyone jump in. Is that developing trust and love for ourselves compatible with what's being discussed in these verses? I'm not saying it isn't, but is it? Is it selfish, in other words, to train ourselves to have trust and belief in ourselves? Is that somehow a limitation from a spiritual perspective?
No, I don't think it is.
No.
I think it's a strength by trusting yourself that you will handle each moment in a calm, quiet way.
Yeah. So I think this is really already an incredibly important point. Although in the thought transformation techniques, we're seeking to transform our entire attitude, not just to ourselves, but to the world and all beings in them, we can't do that without taking responsibility for this one. And what does taking responsibility for this one mean? It means beginning to act skillfully with our body, speech, and mind, our sort of doors of agency, if you like, so that we're producing positive circumstances as we step forward. And so if we have techniques that ensure that this will be the case, then we can trust them in an amazing way, because they'll be unshakable. So I think for me, opening the heart is a form of entrustment to the validity, if you like, of these techniques that are being proposed here, because they provide us with an unshakable refuge, an unshakable source of safety. And it's not a narrow safety, it's a security that will be able to withstand any obstacle that comes our way. Not just that, but as Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, if you recall, we'll be able to transform that crisis into an amazing opportunity for spiritual growth. And so it's not artificial opening of the heart. It's not just a superficial intellectual idea. It's beginning to see more deeply and directly into the way in which we create the circumstances for happiness and unhappiness within our own minds. If we don't understand this, we're going to have very little capacity, of course, to begin to understand how others are struggling, perhaps, as well. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he introduces the 8 verses of thought transformation, presents the following. The 8 verses of thought transformation by Geshe Langpa Tangpa is a teaching of the practice of bodhichitta, the altruistic intention to attain enlightenment, full enlightenment, for the benefit of others. So this is the quintessential ambition that we can have by approaching these teachings. Because we are seeking to overhaul our limited motivation, this happiness of me, and begin to take responsibility for the happiness of all beings. And this might sound grandiose and kind of over the top, but it's not intended that way whatsoever, because, as Shayla said, we have to start here by opening our heart. And so this becomes an amazing source of strength. So bodhicitta, it's a Sanskrit word, sort of referring to awakening mind. It's really the most precious word to contemplate, because if we can begin to approach its significance and its meaning, we're given this golden key for thought transformation. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says the development of bodhicitta, the awakening mind, is the core of the Buddha's teachings and the main path. Once the development of bodhicitta has taken place, the practitioner endeavors to apply the altruistic principle throughout his or her life. This leads to what is known as the bodhisattva ideals, including the 6 perfections, the perfections of generosity, morality, patience, enthusiasm, concentration, and wisdom. Of these 6, the last 2 are the most important, because it is in the context of the perfection of concentration and the insight that the Vajrayana or the Tantric teachings are introduced. And then His Holiness goes back to his earlier point. He says, the point I wish to make here is that the practice of compassion is at the heart of the entire path. All other practices are either preliminary or a foundation for it, or they are subsequent applications of this practice. So I'm going to ask us now to do a very, very simple meditation. We're going to incorporate some meditations into our sessions. And we're going to meditate on the mind of compassion. And I'm going to use a beautiful sequence of triggers, if you like, that Kabje Zopa Rinpoche has given us to begin to grasp how we might begin to apply compassion in terms of our daily experience. And this is really the foundation of our approach to this Discovering Buddhism unit, in fact, to all of them. And so it's very important to do this towards the beginning of our session. So just adopt our meditation posture. And we can become aware of the body, and for a few in and out breaths, Just let any tensions, stresses we might have, leave with the out-breath, melting away. Then with the in-breath, radiant light pours into our body, soothing and relaxing. Then with the next out-breath, we release more subtle tensions, illnesses, problems, and so forth with the out-breath. These dissolve away. Again, inhale radiant light. This is the essence of enlightenment. You feel that this light is indistinguishable from the compassionate wisdom of the Buddhas. And now we commence the second part of the meditation, which is to contemplate the mind of compassion. And in the Buddhist context, compassion has the aspect of being aware of the suffering of others and wishing to transform or alleviate that suffering. So the great challenge of the thought transformation method is to import this motivation, this awareness into every moment of our experience. And so, for this reason, contemplate how wonderful it would be if we could live with compassion. Not just occasionally turn it off or on like a light switch, but actually have it with us at all time. Think how wonderful it would be if we could work with compassion. Work here as in perhaps our job or our obligations to others. You might be buying food to prepare for others and so forth. How wonderful it would be if we could combine these actions with compassion. And as we sift through our daily experience, we might discover so many of our actions are in no way mindful of compassion. This is because we haven't sought to develop and enhance compassion as the most precious mind we might have. So we know, don't we, from our own experience, and I'm asking us to reflect here in our meditation, how incredibly healing and beneficial it is when someone reaches out to us with compassion, particularly to help us in a time of great need, even peril. You might be diagnosed with a illness, for example, even a terminal one. A friend with compassion can reach over and embrace us spontaneously in the most wonderful way, the most supportive way, because they've been motivated by the great mind of compassion. It is the most skillful way. We also die with compassion. This isn't a morbid thought. By training in compassion throughout our daily lives, we'll find that we'll have this resource available to us at the time of death. Death can become a very precious moment in terms of our spiritual practice if we can combine it with the mind of compassion. All of our fears, our acute self-focus, our dread drops away if we are filled with a mind of great compassion, concerned only for the welfare of others. Not just even at this time, but especially at this time. This is a quintessence, if you like, of our entire life, to die with compassion. We also meditate with compassion. This is taking care of ourselves, but also preparing us to be able to open out to caring for others. We also enjoy with compassion. So we're not just focusing here on reflecting upon how we respond to difficult situations, but when we're having a good time or a joyous time, what might it mean to combine these moments with compassion? When problems come, we experience them with compassion. So as part of our exploration in meditation, just reflect for a few moments how even animals appreciate kindness. If you're kind to a dog, it wags its tail. If you scold it, the tail droops. His Holiness the Dalai Lama suggests that when we're young, loving kindness is crucial. But as we grow up, we tend to forget. This is a mistake. Therefore, we should pay more attention to warm-heartedness. Just see in our meditation whether we can locate this sense of warm-heartedness. And then let it radiate outwards to embrace all others who are as precious as ourselves. But because they're more numerous than ourselves, they're actually even more precious than we are. And with that, we conclude the meditation. So this is a little reflective meditation on compassion, but it's really also indicating the manner in which we utilize meditation to absorb the significance of what we're discussing and try to bring it into our heart, rather than keep it at the threshold of intellectual activity or even intellectual games. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that in his own life, he is dedicated to promoting warm-heartedness in our day-to-day life. And he instructs us, this is why we have to pay attention to it. We have to pay attention to it. Not we should, we have to. So there's an incredible invitation here. So are there any comments about the meditation before we move on, or any strong thoughts or feelings that you wish to share that came up?
Ross,
Thanks, Michael. Yeah.
in the meditation, you mentioned that compassion was being aware of what another would be going through and wanting to change that.
Mm-hmm.
Would compassion also be what being aware of what I'm going through and wanting to step out of that suffering?
Yes, but when you step out of is an interesting choice of words, isn't it? Exactly. Compassion has to embrace ourselves. We are the legitimate object of our own compassion. In fact, it would be irresponsible not to have compassion for ourselves, because we wouldn't take care. And by not taking care of ourselves, not only have we damaged or impaired the well-being of this one, i.e. me, but I've rendered myself a kind of flawed instrument to benefit others. I'm incapable of benefiting others successfully because I'm incapable of benefiting myself. And so these two, compassion for self and compassion for others, aren't any way in opposition or contradiction. So I think that's underlying your comment. It's, or your sort of point. It's a very, very important point. And so the kind of compassion that we have to look after this one enables us to begin to see more clearly the situation of others. And this, I think, is really worth focusing upon. When I'm utterly absorbed in my own desperate needs, I'm blinded to the world around me. I'm unable to see what others are doing or what others are going through. And so the mind of compassion is open to direct, unmitigated awareness of the situation that it encounters, and will have the space within it to know precisely how best to skillfully act in that moment to bring about some benefit for the other. And so an example would be that when I gave of having a quarrel at home with someone, and then instead of persisting in the quarrel, we go to our room and we meditate, so that when we re-enter the room, we can see a fresh way of approaching that person and that situation. We're not saying there isn't a problem, and there might be a real problem, but we'll have more repertoire, more scale of choices available to us to begin to see how we might respond. And so it's exactly the same with self-compassion. How many of us feel trapped by ourselves? Am I the only one who feels trapped by myself sometimes? You sort of get so caught up in the idea of who you are and what you are that you don't even entertain the possibility of doing certain things that are new and fresh, because you think, oh no, I can't do that. I can't go to university and become a doctor at the age of 40. I should have done that when I was 20. You know, I'm a disaster. I've just messed up every one of my opportunities, and I'm now living with the ghastly consequences. That kind of thought process is the opposite of compassion, because we're not looking at the fact that there is a person here who is having a really difficult time and isn't really enjoying what's occurring in their life. And so we have to look after that one, not judge them and not reject them on the basis of what we see them as having achieved or not achieved, but just to think at least take care of the person at the level of nourishment. I don't mean nourishment just in food, but just supplying all the resources that people have to feel safe and secure. One of the this topic really hit me hard on a particular weekend course that was given by my teacher, Geshe Doga, who referred to compassion as a field of virtue. It was a field as in a wheat field, like a kind of a terrain of virtue, a terrain of goodness. And in that goodness, the very best outcomes can arise. They can germinate because the goodness nourishes the positive potential that we all have. And so when we begin to generate this mind of compassion for ourselves and for others, we begin to nurture the seeds of our own potential for positive transformation. This will happen spontaneously through the benefit of the techniques themselves. So this is why I said at the very beginning in this Buddhist sort of introduction, we don't need to suddenly take on, oh, I'm Buddhist. That's not important. We need to look at what it might mean to have compassion for ourselves, for example. What a great challenge that is straight away. And what benefits might that have? So the first verse of the 8 verses is with the wish to achieve the highest aim, which surpasses even a wish-fulfilling gem. I shall train myself to at all times cherish sentient beings as supreme. So has anyone got any ideas about what it might mean here to cherish sentient beings as supreme? What just your initial thoughts? What might that mean?
Precious.
Yeah.
They're precious. Yeah, that's the word I can think of. Sorry.
Why are they precious for you in that moment?
They're a treasure. They're people that we love. We're the people that we admire.
Yeah. So to cherish sentient beings as supreme, it's all sentient beings as well. In the scale of this first verse is mind-boggling, isn't it? We start to think about it. Jay?
Yeah. The other thing about sentient beings, particularly human beings for me, I can get it best of all, is that recognizing that they are all potential Buddhas, that there is that spark from, in my wording, would be the spark of divinity is in everyone, and to try to connect with that and acknowledge it, and recognizing that there are ways that it is so heavily disguised, it's hard to do that. But knowing, and it inspires me to think, and I may be off in la la land, but at some point we will all be Buddhists, and this whole situation will, in some sense, resolve, in a very positive manner. Yeah.
So that's, again, a really wonderful contribution, because we can legitimately regard others supreme if, as Jay is mentioning, they have this same potential to become fully enlightened as every other being. This is the essence of morality, actually. If we can begin to relate to each and every being that we meet as the carrier of this potential, we'll no longer be able to dish out all the kind of negative and demeaning and belittling thoughts that we use to foster and protect a limited egotistical self idea. It begins to melt that hard shell and break it open. And so sentient beings are supreme because they override the importance of just this one. I'm included in your supreme, so I'm not left out. I'm still here, and I'm still going to have to cultivate all my positive potential in order to be able to regard and act to others and with others skillfully as supreme by beginning to develop my own spiritual potential. And so I'm not being left out. I'm not being neglected in this pursuit of holding others as supreme. And so others, from a Buddhist perspective, are regarded as like precious jewels, because it's in our encounter with others that we're able to coax our capacity for transformation. If we're not challenged, for example, by someone getting angry with us, it's a very famous example, we will not recognize that we have no patience. We have no patience because the moment someone jabs us and it hurts, we fire up and we retaliate. And so in the thought transformation teachings, we're going to learn to regard that person as our precious teacher, because it's only their kindness in infuriating us and upsetting us in that moment that is giving us the opportunity to measure the extent of our own spiritual development or lack thereof. So they become an instructor in a way that enables us to continue our journey of transformation. And so these are really wonderful and remarkable ideas. So Geshe Chekwa, in his commentary on this verse, points out two aspects of similitude or similarity between wish-fulfilling jewels and sentient beings. And the first is that wish-fulfilling jewels and sentient beings are alike in that both can serve as agents to help us achieve our wishes and welfare. So that's the first aspect. And the second is, just as a wish-fulfilling jewel can't be cleansed of mud, obscuring its clarity or purity without our agency, we have to actually wash it. Likewise, sentient beings cannot be helped to escape from the mire of the unenlightened state without our help and support. They remain like unwashed gems. So you can see here there's two major limbs to this point. One is that sentient beings can help us by serving as agencies for us to achieve our own goals. And secondly, they are wish-fulfilling gems that we can help realize and mature their potential by acting towards them in the most beneficial and supportive ways, no longer injuriously and so forth. So His Holiness says there's also a reference here to the kindness of all other sentient beings. For the Mahayana practitioner, it is due to other beings that we can develop great compassion, the highest spiritual principle. And it is thanks to other sentient beings that we can develop bodhichitta, the altruistic intention. So it is on the basis of our interaction with others that we can gain the highest spiritual realizations. From this point of view, His Holiness concludes, the kindness of others is very profound. So this is referred to in the teachings as meditating on the kindness of others. And we're recognizing they're kind, even initially, simply by being there as objects for our concern and objects for our practice. How many of us, if we locked ourselves away in a cave tomorrow with, say we've got a good food supply, are going to be actually able to gain some spiritual transformation, just as we are now? We need to prepare and work for that transformation to come about. And so we'll recognize very, very quickly that once we start to look at my need for happiness, that we have to look at how we're dependent on the kindness of others. And so Kabje Zopa Rinpoche, when he discusses these points, often does long meditations about how every mouthful of food, for example, we take has been produced and made available to us through the kindness of others. And of course, the infant in her mother's arms is the most beautifully poignant example of that. That child is dependent and will flourish due to the kindness of its mother. So this first verse of the 8 verses is asking us to see all beings as precious and to hold them dear. And this involves recognizing the incalculable benefit that we've received from relatives, from friends, from educational care, from doctors and nurses, encouragement and support, constructive criticism, and so forth. We can even contemplate the care and help that we've received from strangers. The buildings we use, the clothes we wear, food we eat, the roads we drive upon, all were made by people we do not know. So if we begin to think more deeply about these things, we'll recognize that we owe a kind of gratitude. We have a mind of gratitude to other beings for making these conditions available. Without their efforts, and we look at, a society and how it operates as sort of an entity, without that entity, what conditions of life would we actually have? What opportunities would we have to transform our weaknesses into strength, to educate ourselves, and so forth? So the conclusion is that in recognizing the benefit that we receive from other people, we open our heart in gratitude to them. So I'm going to ask us now to do another short meditation. And this is going to be a very personal meditation because I'm going to ask us to select someone very real in our lives who has shown great care and concern for us. So become aware of the body. Just for a few cycles of breath, release any tensions. Breathe in radiant light. And in the spaciousness that's invoked, recollect this person who is especially kind to us. Now, in a very honest and open manner, just recollect the details of their care. Perhaps there were certain situations in which they showed their remarkable loving kindness towards us. In my own case, my friend sat in my room following my stem cell transplant for bone marrow cancer, just being there, so that at those moments where I might have been able to muster up enough cognizance, if you like, to be aware that there was someone in the room, it was guaranteed that they would be there. What kindness, what an amplitude of kindness enabled that person, that dear friend, to sit with such open generosity for me. So just find our own examples. And if strong feelings are invoked as we do this meditation, that's very good. We allow these feelings to flow. Now in the meditation, open our heart with gratitude to this person. And seek to protect and benefit them in every possible way, both now and in the future, never letting them drop from our loving concern for even a moment. In other words, promise to repay their kindness from the very depths of our heart, and feel joy as we do this. This is the most wondrous thought. We can actually do this. And with that, we conclude the meditation. So this is really an example of meditating on the verses themselves. So we're taking some of the key aspects of the verse and bringing that in to the arena, if you like, of our meditation, our format for our meditation, and actually employing it as a technique to transform our mind. So has anyone got any feelings or thoughts to share about the material so far? So I've tossed out a number of ideas. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
Me? Okay. Look, there are various techniques that I use to manage my upset with people in life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Some of which you've covered. Now, I would love a suggestion about this one. The most pressing thing at this time, I live on an esplanade. It's unpaved. It has a lot of traffic. It has a lot of ruts in it, and it has an enormous amount of dust tossed up. Every time somebody barrels by, exceeding the speed limit, I have to put it politely, bad thoughts about them. Okay? Yeah. So my question is this. Well, I'll tell you the technique that I have found most productive for me is that I think, okay, if I were that person's mom and they were a silly teenager doing this kind of stuff, I would be upset, but I would be patient and think, they'll get over it. They'll grow up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that would kind of keep me calmer and more centered about this. So that's been the best sort of head technique I've been able to come up with. I would love to have any other suggestions you might have, because I'm afraid I have other thoughts that rush in that are very negative, to put it politely. Yeah? Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to throw that open to others as well, because I think it's good we have a conversation around these topics, because we all navigate in different ways. So I have some suggestions, but I would like to hear what others think first. Yeah. We all have equivalent situations, don't we?
Ross and Jay, I actually like what you said about they'll get over it, but I actually always try to, right after I think they'll get over it, I always try to think, okay, but if I'm going to get through it, I need to get over it. Because without me getting over it, it doesn't matter if they do or not.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying start with here and end with here in a way, in a good way. You don't seek to modify their behavior. You try to rearrange your own response. Is that what your point
Because
is?
in the end, regardless of my prayer, my meditation, my thoughts, everything else, I can't actually change their behaviors. I can only change the way I look at things and I respond to things.
Yeah.
So for me, it's about changing. It's about changing what I think, what I see, what I do, what I believe. It's about changing my own body, speech, and mind.
Mm.
So, Michael, specifically for this kind of situation, what would you be doing? What would you be talking to yourself about as they rush by and this dust is kicked up? What would your process be?
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard to say because let's say, for example, I had asthma and everybody, or I had a child who had asthma, and every time they went rushing by, I or my child now starts into this coughing fit and this breathing difficulty. I mean, I know that I would take that very differently than if they say, well, it's kicking up dust and life goes on. So it's really about why does that thing, why does that action, why does that have negative consequences? Why does it trigger me? I don't want to say negative. Why does it trigger me, regardless of whether there's negative consequences or not? For me, it's why does that trigger me? What is it about me that gets triggered because somebody throws up dust in the air? And there are lots of good things about why I don't want people to do that, right? But the question for me is always, why does that bother me? And then I have to look at myself, so I make sure that I'm addressing that first. That doesn't mean they should be driving down the road like a bat out of hell, stirring up dust, kicking up rocks that hit windows and cars and maybe kids and animals and all the rest of this stuff, and again can cause breathing things and all that. I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but I always have to ask, why? What is it about me? What is being triggered in me, and why is that thing being triggered? How do I, in Ross's thing earlier, how do I pull myself out of that, meditate on that, and say, what is that about me, so that I can go back with more options?
So it's a fabulous example, isn't it? There's one beautiful story. When I say beautiful, it's a sort of beautifully moving story of one of the Tibetan monks who was a recognized sort of lama, a very highly sort of respected lama, and he was imprisoned in Tibet when the Chinese occupied, and he was in prison for 20 years, and often in extreme sort of solitary confinement sort of situations, like really, really severe incarceration. And when he was asked how he met, when he came out, he actually ended up in India, and he was interviewed and asked how he had managed, and not to sort of go flip out. And he said that he meditated on the kindness of his jailers and of all sentient beings. And so he took the jailer, who was the most, many ostensible ways, the most difficult one, as the object of his love. Because if he could manage that one, this is getting back to the road story, he could manage anything. So it's like the most difficult situation, take it first and transform it. And so when the dust is thrown up, think of that person who's throwing up the dust and wish them every benefit and happiness in this and all future lives from the very depths of your heart. Not as a curse, may you be happy, but genuinely want them to be happy. And that will I'm going to use the word detoxify the structure, the dichotomy of me and them in an antagonistic relationship, which is what is aggravating the situation. Then there are a whole lot of practical other things too, to do with, gardens and building fences or whatever, getting in contact with the council to get a road island put in to slow people down, whatever. It's not denying practical solutions to the dust problem, but it's starting with the objectification of the dust maker as a kind of problem in and of itself. That dust maker is not considering the happiness of others. Admittedly, when they're driving like that, they're forgetting that in their bid to give themselves pleasure. And so this is really an extraordinarily vivid epitomization of what we're also doing in countless situations in our lives. And so just as the angry person can be seen as our teacher for patience, so can this dust maker. So I don't know if that helps at all, but it's another possibility. Yes, Jay? Jay's got her hand up. Oh, no, maybe just raise.
No, that was
Annie.
a thank you. Annie has her hand up. Thank you.
Oh, Annie. Thank you, Annie.
Hello. Can you please
Hi, Annie.
Hi, can you please elaborate a little bit more on how like the Lama would see the jailer as I forget the words you said, but like how do you switch your thinking to that? Like how would one switch their thinking to that?
Yeah, that's a question that takes us to the very heart of the thought transformation techniques. So the person who is jailing here is being driven by circumstances to perform an action which is highly restrictive and creates great difficulty for others. However, if we go deeper in our investigation, we realize that there is a person there in that jailer who is wishing to have happiness and not to suffer, just like ourselves. And on that basis, we generate love and concern. So we're not saying that we have to condone the action of jailing in this case as somehow a good thing, because it would be perhaps crazy to suggest that it would be a good thing in this circumstance, but that we don't ditch the person with the problem, the baby with the bathwater. We try to rescue the person in that situation from the situation. When I say rescue, I mean in terms of our view of them. We try to rescue our view of that person from the situation, because otherwise we run the risk of resenting them, discarding them, or abandoning them. So the Dalai Lama often talks about losing his country as an opportunity for him to practice great kindness, for example. So it's a way of sort of opening out to this broader responsibility. So we're not saying it's condoning being held captive through force, but we're trying to still care and embrace each and every being with whom we meet. Does that help answer the question? So I can't hear.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. It does. It just sort of makes me wonder, living regular life, when people upset us or there's conflict, and definitely trying not to react and definitely trying to, take a moment. Are we trying to see that there's a human being that wants happiness, so therefore we don't use harsh speech, or we take a moment so that our action can be skillful because there's a real person there who wants happiness? Is that how I should be transforming my thought?
Yes, I think it's an excellent way of describing the situation. Yeah.
That's very radical.
It's more than radical. It's the direct opposite of our habitual response, driven by selfish motivation. It's swinging that right around to its opposite. And so this is why we embrace the difficult situation as the most precious opportunity to practice, because that's the nodal point where we can begin to transform ourselves in very, very real ways, no longer superficial ways. Yeah.
I feel like sometimes in Western culture, like I feel like perhaps, Eastern countries, when you don't say something, it's not looked upon as being weak. But I feel like sometimes in the West, when you don't respond, but I kind of see what you're saying. I see what you're saying is that when we're responding, don't respond with venom, but respond with skill, should there be a response,
Yeah.
right?
And there's more to it, because if someone's bullying us, for example, using bullying as a good example, offering, one of these verses says, offer the victory to others.
Yeah, how does that work?
I don't say, oh, right, bully me. I'm yours. Just bully me. Go ahead. It's saying that once we drop away the need to intensely protect this very tight view of ourselves as the most important one, we're freed up, we're enabled, we're suddenly able to see the situation in a more open, creative way and work out how best to respond. And it might be that we can even yell back at the bully and tell them to stop. Inappropriate, totally inappropriate, stop. But we do that command from a very reliable place in ourselves, a space of clarity, because it's not helping the bully to bully, and it's not helping us to allow ourselves to be bullied. So we have to seize somehow upon that aspect in ourselves that is able to respond to the bullying scenario in a forceful, skillful way, which may involve presenting a great force that's going to be so the bully runs for it. Because bullies are cowards, as we know. The bully and coward is the same, two sides of the same coin. A bully will bully someone who they perceive as weaker. The moment they see someone showing some sign of independent strength, they look for another victim. They go elsewhere. And so we can't resort to being strong and presenting that unbullyable demeanor if we haven't got the confidence in ourselves to do that. And so these are the sorts of confidences that can come from meditation. I'm not saying we have to go looking for bullies in order to make them run away, but it becomes, really quite interesting to look at these real life situations. Yeah. So, Claudia?
Thank you.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
So I've got a question. Would it be accurate or useful to think of all of these situations? I have a very similar one to Jay with the neighbor that I don't even want to go into. I've had bullies at places I've worked, but is it useful to just really take them in as opportunities? Like, if nobody ever rubbed me the wrong way, if nobody ever pressed my buttons, how would I develop these skills without like this hands-on real kind of situation in my face? So can that be useful?
Absolutely. In fact, that's really, again, taking us towards the reasons why the thought transformation techniques are so incredibly useful in daily life. So we utilize those situations creatively in our meditation.
Okay.
And we also can relate when we go out, get off our cushion in a more skillful manner because we've spent that time on our cushion. And so my teacher, Geshe Doga, often says, when you get angry, meditate on anger. That's what's precipitated at that moment as the big one, the big problem. It's maybe there's a person who's triggering the anger, but Geshe Doga says, meditate on the anger. Look at what that's doing to you in that moment. Look at what it's making you capable of doing. And as Shantideva famously points out in his Guide to a Bodhisattva's Way of Life, anger can turn us into a weapon in a flash that can cause incredible injury that we'll regret for the rest of our lives, potentially. How many people who are in jail for crimes of so-called passion have regretted that loss of control endlessly, but they can't revoke that situation. It occurred, it happened. And so in the thought transformation techniques, we try to sit with some of these trying situations like dust makers and so forth, and use them as as our object of meditation. So to feel and to feel love and compassion towards the dust maker. And it's not trivial, this kind of pursuit. It's really very, very direct in its benefits. So we'll find that when we get up off our cushion, those things have the potential not to be as difficult to handle. So we all have our breaking point, don't we? We all have our kind of two hard basket situations and people. But by working with the situations we can approach those more difficult ones with increasing skill and get more and more able to work with them as well. We can't take it all on straight away. We have to train. This is why we call this mind training. It really is a process of training.
Is it okay if I share one more thing?
Absolutely.
And I don't know if this will be useful to anyone, and I don't know if it's a desired result, but I had a moment back in May. I'm not sure what happened, and that's what drove me to come and find the center and join the center and get me back on this Buddhist path, which was very bizarre. So I spent I would say 7-8 days just really focused on it, finding classes, finding books, reading everything I could. And for all of those days, not once did I think about my neighbor. Not once did I hear my neighbor doing the things he normally does. And I'm like, what just happened? Whereas this thing that bothered me every single day of my life for like years on end just went away when my focus shifted. And
So you
I was
forgot, you, in a sense, you forgot to
I
have a
don't know if I
problem.
forgot. I mean, I don't want to say that like I manifested it and things shifted, but like, how did I just suddenly, was he really not making noise? Was I really not noticing the noise? It was very, it took me by surprise, got me curious. Still don't know what happened. So I'm still kind of exploring that. But yeah, when I got interested in something else, he kind of went away.
So it's an interesting observation, isn't it? It's a very real one. One of the characteristics we have when we generate what we call an afflicted mind, a mind that causes disturbance and pain experientially when it rises, is that we embellish it and we exaggerate it. And so someone who has become just mildly irritating, for example, we zero in on the proportion of mild irritation they have, and then we feel it more intensely so that it begins to pervade and flood our awareness of the person themselves. And then we feel abhorrent towards that person as an entirety, towards an entity. All it was they were slurping their soup, perhaps. But now they've become the most unwanted one in the universe, according to our point of view. And so this sort of process of elaboration is a capacity of our own mind to seize upon a tiny aspect and deform it and exaggerate it so that it appears to be the inherent characteristic of the object itself. This is the basis that enables a fully fledged afflicted mind to get up and running. Yeah.
Ross, I'd like to see if you have a comment about, there was someone, Barbara earlier said when we
Oh,
were talking.
yes. I saw that just now. Yeah.
I have trouble resolving this verse when it comes to non-human animals. They are sentient and therefore supreme. However, many people eat them, and then they cite karma as a way of making it okay.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, what can we say? This is exactly a pertinent point, isn't it? And so there's the sense here that we humans, anthropomorphic kind of exaggerators, see ourselves as the big ones, and all other life forms are inferior and are to be plundered with impunity. And this kind of arrogance is deeply problematic. And so considering our relationship to animals is extremely pertinent and extremely important. It's a fundamental ethical relationship. So I can't see how you can dismiss the needs of animals from our discussion. I think it's very, very important. Barbara, do you want to speak to that a little bit? Are you still not sure she's still present? Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. So you can't, from a Buddhist perspective, you can't cite karma as making it okay. So it's a matter of working out how best to respond in the ethical situation of our relationship with all other beings, including animals. So we have to try to adopt our best practice, in other words, whatever form that takes. So we might conclude here, and we'll just spend a few moments in meditation, just allowing any of the thoughts or ideas that are being raised to settle. and then to feel how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings abided in equanimity, free from holding some close and others distant. How wonderful it would be if all sentient beings achieved only higher rebirths and the supreme bliss of liberation. May they achieve these. May I, the meditator, be able to bring this about. Please, precious Buddha, inspire me to be able to do this. And with that, we are dedicated. So I might ask Michael to read our verses of dedication as the conclusion of the session. Thank you. We'll do the dedication prayer. Yeah, Kawadi.
Sorry,
Do you
Are
for
you
the...
muted, Michael?
couldn't get myself unmuted. Due to
That's all right, yeah.
these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. Wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled.
Thank you very much. And next week, we're going to continue with the eight verses. And so the second verse is, whenever I interact with others, I shall view myself as inferior to all, and I'll train myself to hold others superior from the depths of my heart. So this verse is going to be very provocative, and it's going to require a great degree of skill in our understanding of it. And so for that reason, I'm going to ask us to read His Holiness the Dalai Lama's commentary on the 8 verses, which is in our reader's kit. I think it's about 23 pages long, but definitely read the sections covering verses 1 and 2 for next session. That would be a great help for our discussion as well. So thank you very much for your attendance today, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you.